Okay, thanks to everybody. Welcome back to the last few talks in the Human Origins in Action online workshop. I think we have 2 sessions left to get through this afternoon. We are very, very happy to now have Dr. Briana Pobiner from the Human Origins program at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. So we are really fortunate. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day and joining us. She's going to talk about the Smithsonian's approach to public engagement on human origins, sort of continue what we talked about earlier today. I think it's a really great session, so I hope you're all excited. As you know, the Smithsonian is one of the largest institutes in the U.S. for museums and cultural remains and these different things. So I think it's going to be a fantastic talk on public engagement. So thank you very much for joining us, and take it away.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who's attending. So I'm Briana Pobiner, and I work at in the Human Origins program at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. I am not there now. Our museum is still closed, although hopefully we will be reopening to the public soon. And just to give you a little bit of background on me, I started working at the Smithsonian as a pre-doctoral fellow as I was finishing my PhD research on the evolution of human diets. So I still study from a zooarchaeological and taphonomic perspective, early meat eating in human evolution. So all the content talks have been really fascinating to me. And I've had a long history of working in East Africa. But a lot of my responsibilities now at the Smithsonian are to lead our public engagement on human origins. So that's what I'll talk to you about today. And the outline of my talk, I'm going to give a little bit of data on US public acceptance of human evolution. Although we are a global institution, a lot of our visitors are from the US. And then I'm just going to talk about 3 different examples of how we put our approach into action after I talk about what that approach is, with our on-site public programs when the museum is open, our traveling library exhibition, and a high school biology curriculum project. So, US acceptance of human evolution is relatively low. The Gallup poll has been asking a question since 1982. Which of the following statements comes closest to your views on the origin and development of human beings? And there's basically 3 answers that people can choose. The first, which you can see on the top with that gray line, is God created man in present form. And so that's kind of we would call it a creationist approach to the origin and development of human beings. That middle line in green, that basically humans evolved, but God played some part in the process. And that bottom line in dark green is basically a strictly non-creationist or scientific approach that humans evolved and God had no part in it. And you can see that that's the lowest proportion and really has been since that question was first asked in 1982. And there was great excitement among scientists when finally in 2019, there was an increase up to 22% of Americans that accept the evolution of humans without any kind of supernatural kind of intervention. So, I could have a whole separate talk about the way that these questions are framed, and that basically a lot of these polls present the issue in terms of belief or acceptance with basically sort of alternatives that might be in conflict. But it's relevant for us to think about who our audience is coming through the door of the museum, visiting our exhibits, attending our public programs. The graph on the right is from a paper that was published in 2006, which compared the public acceptance of evolution. Actually, it was a question about human evolution in 34 countries. And the blue bars are people who accept the idea of humans evolving. The brown bars was they're not sure. And on the right, the red bars are they do not think that humans evolved. And so the US is second to bottom of these 34 countries in public acceptance of human evolution. So our approach at the Smithsonian is really trying to go beyond the conflict mode, beyond asking people to choose, particularly as we know that religion can be for some people a barrier to engagement with the evidence for human origins and human evolution. We really want to go beyond this conflict mode, and we want to foster inclusive dialogue on topics about science and society, particularly about evolution and human evolution. Our goal is that those conversations are, we're having conversations about this, is that those conversations are respectful, that they're undertaken with cultural awareness and sensitivity, and that they're welcoming to all audiences. We do not take an information deficit model approach to science communication. And so there's lots of great studies that show that this model does not work. This model is the idea that, well, the reason that people don't accept science or evolution or some particular topic is because they just don't know enough about it. And if we tell them more information about it, they have an information deficit, then they'll absolutely accept the science. Yay, they will love science after we just give them more information. And we know that that's not the case. Attitudes and acceptance of evolution in particular have a very complex relationship to knowledge. And it's not a straightforward, the more people know, the more they will accept. So I'm going to talk to you about our strategies in trying to overcome some of these barriers. I run an on-site public program at NMNH, which is the National Museum of Natural History. One of the programs I run is called The Scientist is In. And these are informal conversational programs that, again, when the museum is open, take place twice a month. These involve scientists. Oftentimes I try to recruit early career scientists, graduate students. They stand at a mobile cart with objects, and they interact informally with visitors as they walk through the exhibition. I will often do some coaching for participants who haven't done as much public engagement before, but it's really an opportunity for visitors to get to know scientists personally, to ask them questions, to be able to see and touch objects. We also have another program that usually we do once a month in the museum when it's open, and we have transitioned these programs to online. In fact, we did one earlier today, and these are called our hot topic programs, Human Origins Today. This is also an informal program. It's not a lecture, but it involves an expert making brief introductory comments about a particularly interesting science topic, and then really leading a Q&A or discussion with the audience. Some of the topics that we've had for some of our hot topic programs when the museum is open include evolution and the evangelical community, Native American perspectives on humanity's relation to the earth, human evolution in the K-12 classroom, how do you trace modern human origins and migrations with DNA, genetics and human disease. So topics that really spark conversation in our visitors. So I'll present some evaluation data from The Scientist is In, and this was an evaluation study that was done several years ago, focusing both on The Scientist is In our exhibit and in our Ocean Hall. So we found that 88% of visitors naturally approached the cart and initiated their engagement with the scientist. So having a scientist in a more informal setting seems to be really productive. Visitors only spend about 4 minutes engaging with the scientist during the Scientist is In program. So that's something we tell our scientists to keep in mind. This is not something where you're going to be talking to visitors for 15 or 20 minutes. But almost all of them displayed nonverbal signs of engagement with the scientist, nodding, laughing, pointing, and focused listening. 47% of the visitors observed for the study expressed awe and wonder verbally, and this was kind of a goal of ours, and 67% demonstrated curiosity by asking at least one question. And we were really happy with this particular finding. Excuse me. Visitors to these exhibits who engaged with the scientist were significantly more likely to rate their general science interests high than those who did not engage with the scientist. They're also more likely to, significantly more likely to say they enjoy studying science and they would like to be a scientist. So again, we find that these programs tend to spark interest in science in our museum visitors. Now I'll move on to our second tool in our outreach belt, I guess, a traveling library exhibition. So you see a picture on the left of throngs of people waiting to get into the museum, which I assume will happen again once we open our doors, hopefully soon. And on the right, you see visitors walking through the Hall of Human Origins. But we recognize that not everyone can come to Washington, D.C. and visit our exhibit. So soon after the Hall of Human Origins opened at the museum in 2010, the exhibit team, we realized that it was important to be able to sort of take our exhibit beyond Washington, D.C. and beyond the walls of the museum. So we decided to promote a national conversation on human evolution by touring the Smithsonian's Hall of Human Origins to public libraries in the US. So you see here a picture of our traveling library exhibit. From April 2015 to April 2017, we took this traveling exhibit to 19 public libraries across the US. And this is a map of the places where this exhibit visited. These particular 19 locations were chosen out of more who submitted an application to the American Library Association to host our exhibit. We specifically wanted to choose at least 10 communities which describe themselves as where this evidence presented might be challenging from their community, whether it was from a religious perspective, whether it was from simply a demographic perspective. We had a couple communities say there's been really changing demographics in our community, and so there's sort of questions about broader humanity. And the financial support for this library tour was from the John Templeton Foundation and the Peter Buck Fund for Human Origins Research. So as we traveled across the country, the aspirations of this traveling library exhibit, and I should mention that we partnered with the American Library Association because in the US public libraries are a real hub of community. We wanted to make the fossil, the archaeological, and the genetic findings on which the scientific narrative of human evolution is built accessible to new and local audiences. We wanted to nurture local community conversations about the science and diverse perspectives that different people bring to the subject of human evolution. And we really wanted to foster connections between scientific information and the ways in which people form meaningful understandings of the world. And I really like this picture. So this is we have 5 bronze replicas of different hominin species in our permanent exhibit. And we made a fiberglass replica of this Neanderthal mother and toddler that traveled around with our library exhibit. And kids just love this sculpture. So we did 4 different programs at our public libraries. The first was slightly more of a traditional lecture program. It was called Exploring Human Origins, What Does It Mean to Be Human? And our traveling exhibit and permanent exhibit curator, Dr. Rick Potts, gave a general public talk about the latest research in human evolution. He provided an overview of the exhibit's themes and messages, and the exhibit is titled Exploring Human Origins, What Does It Mean to Be Human? But he began with an initial conversation with the audience, inviting them to offer their own perspectives on the question, what does it mean to be human? So beginning again with an initial invitation for people attending to share their views. And then he talked about how fossils, archaeology, and genetic studies shed light on our connection with the natural world and the origins of behaviors that people are interested in, sharing, caring, and human innovation. The second public program that we did was a community conversation, sort of like a town hall. And this community conversation was titled Exploring the Meanings of Human Evolution, a community conversation. And meanings is plural very deliberately. This program was led by the co-chairs of an advisory committee to us in the Human Origins program called our Broader Social Impacts Committee. Those co-chairs are Dr. Connie Burtka and Dr. Jim Miller. You could see them here. They happen to be wearing matching purple shirts with sort of, black coats that day. And so this program was aimed at explicitly addressing the variety of religious and cultural perspectives that intersect with scientific findings on human evolution, and to create room for discussions through civil and open dialogue, inviting the public to voice personal insights. We also sought to explore with people the idea that scientific perspectives and religious perspectives on human evolution need not inherently be in conflict. So these were all informal conversations again. We also held 2 programs that were not open to the public, that were for specific audiences. The first one was that at each library, there was a special event for religious leaders and prominent members of faith communities on the topic of human origins. So for these clergy, we did a tour of the exhibit led by Dr. Potts, and then we led participants in a discussion about questions that the exhibit might raise for their communities. We were able to introduce the religious and faith leaders to the work of our broader social impacts committee and resources to offer at the intersections of science, evolution, human origins, and religious faith. And then the last event we did is that I led a workshop for local science educators, including K-12 and college and university teachers, informal science educators, and even homeschool parents. And so at this workshop, educators were provided an opportunity to talk about their experiences teaching evolution and human evolution, any conflicts they had had, any apprehensions they have about the topic. And it also introduced them to our online, our print, and other resources that we were making available to them to assist in their teaching. Additionally, you can see there's a few skull replicas on that table. So part of our funding for the traveling exhibit included funding to 3D print 5 replicas of hominin skulls that were donated to each library as a resource that the educators could actually check out. So I created a lesson plan around these 5 skull replicas, and educators are still checking them out from our libraries, from the libraries that we visited. Libraries also put on their own programs at least once a week, and these were incredibly creative. And as the libraries were submitting their proposals to get the exhibit to come to their library, they had to outline what sorts of programs they would do. So there were film discussions, book discussions, lots of libraries did cave painting activities, and other sort of creative art-oriented programs for kids. So we also had an external evaluator assess whether we were able to meet our goals in this traveling exhibit. They're called Slover-Linnet Audience Research. And they calculated that a little over 210,000 people visited the traveling exhibit and participated in the related public programs. There were 291 public programs in the 19 libraries where this traveling exhibit visited, and over 1,700 school classes visited the exhibit. And so what was the public response? So we had these visitor comment cards, and this is my favorite one. This person said, "Best exhibit ever. The skulls are great. I love the timeline." And the skulls. I don't know what to say, but I love them. So we had a really generally positive response to this exhibit. We also engaged the people who came to the library exhibits by asking them to write their answer to the question, what does it mean to be human, on a sticky note, and to stick it up on one of the exhibit displays. You could see the kids on the left are writing their answers on the sticky notes, not to hopefully write a dissertation, but to, write a couple of ideas. We collected over 7,300 sticky notes from all 19 libraries. And in fact, we transcribed all of those sticky notes. You can see them on our website, humanorigins.si.edu. If you look for our traveling exhibit, every single library has its own page with the transcription of all of those sticky notes. Here's one that I really like. Thank you, Greene County Library, for having the courage to bring this exhibit to the Bible Belt. Wonderful, a great teaching moment for my kids. So I just want to present a little bit more of the evaluation data. So about 35% of the visitors who completed surveys, a little over 2,100 of them, had beliefs that rejected completely or were skeptical about human evolution or evolution by natural processes. So this is the third of the people that visited that didn't really accept human evolution. Of those people, there was still a high level of agreement. 73% said they still enjoyed the exhibit or the program they attended. 59% thought that scientific research on human evolution could enrich our understanding of what it means to be human. 58% of those skeptical people felt that their faith or worldview could coexist with the idea that humans have evolved over time. 53%, more than half, thought that the exhibit or program presented human evolution in a way that was respectful of their beliefs. 40% were interested in further discussing the topic of human evolution with friends or family. Again, 40% of that skeptical subset. 26% shared with others their views on human origins or human evolution, and only 10% thought the exhibit was trying to change their mind about something they didn't believe in. So we were very happy with these results. And this, I really like this photo. This is 2 teachers from one of the teacher workshops who were having a good time with our skullcast. So in summary, we found that respectful, open conversations really prevailed, that people who reject or are skeptical about human evolution sometimes even engaged even more intensively with our exhibit and programs. We also found that even people who feel knowledgeable about human evolution, kind of the pro-science people, sometimes held misconceptions about human evolution. We also found that people were looking for a deep level of conversation about this topic, and they were usually able to model their comments and interactions in open and honest, respectful ways after our own. So positive findings. In 2019, we started a pilot project to bring this library to seminaries who train religious leaders. So from January to August, we brought this exhibit to Payne Theological Seminary in Wilberforce, Ohio. This is an African Methodist Episcopal seminary and the oldest freestanding African American seminary in the US. And this is the group at Payne Seminary, where we had a lovely time with a whole series of programs. And from September to December of 2019, we had the exhibit at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia, which is a Presbyterian seminary. So we're hoping when things open back up again to continue to travel this exhibit to both public libraries and seminaries. Now I'm gonna just end with a little bit of information on a project that I'm spearheading about teaching evolution in US high school science classrooms. So we know that there are lots of factors that contribute to an anti-evolution worldview, and that cultural and religious objections by some to the teaching evolution can really negatively impact students' willingness to engage this topic. However, our project hypothesis is that using human examples to teach about evolution in biology classes will increase students' understanding, acceptance, and interest in evolution. And there's lots of good research on the college level that this is the case, but there's very little work that's been done in high school classrooms so far. So we decided to develop 4 curriculum units, initially for advanced placement, so very advanced biology in high school. And these 3 of these curriculum units, you can see the 3 to the left, adaptation to altitude, evolution of human skin color, and malaria, are about natural selection in modern humans. The last one, called What Does It Mean to Be Human, is really about human phylogeny and relatedness. And we wanted to choose topics that we thought incorporated science content that was sufficiently robust for the potential for sustained use, but offered a high potential to engage and excite teachers and students because they're relevant to their lives. We also created a unique resource called our Cultural and Religious Sensitivity Teaching Strategies resource. So we realized that the students who hold worldviews that preclude acceptance of evolution are unlikely to learn about evolution until these issues are explicitly addressed, and that acknowledging the controversy and fostering positive dialogue is likely the most effective instructional method for teaching evolution as a controversial issue. And the teaching or the pedagogical approach that was used in this resource is called procedural neutrality, where information about a controversy and different points of view were elicited from the students in the resource material. And the goals of this resource were to encourage and help equip high school teachers to promote positive dialogue around the topic of evolution in their classrooms, to create an environment that allows for a greater understanding of science, to help teachers to acknowledge and manage any cultural or religious controversies if they should arise, but not to specifically resolve any conflict the students might see between their personal worldview and the scientific account of human evolution. That's probably beyond what a teacher can be asked to do, but really to just help create a non-threatening classroom environment. This resource, I'll talk a little, so this resource had 2 main parts. One is just background information for teachers to help them feel more confident about teaching about the nature of science, the range of creationist beliefs. Not everyone who would label themselves a creationist is necessarily anti-evolution. about, in the US, legal cases dealing with the teaching of evolution, so what you can and cannot introduce in a classroom. And then we had 2 classroom activities. One was to be introduced before the unit, a directed discussion in areas with high resistance to evolution, and in areas with low resistance, a historical role play to do after the unit. And I'm happy to answer questions specifically about those activities. So when we did our initial study, we found that, and this ACORNS test, which I'm showing, is basically an assessment of understanding of evolution. The pink bars are before the unit and the brown bars are after. We generally found an increase in student understanding of evolution. This was great. We also looked at student attitudes or acceptance of evolution, and this is this gene, and these were published surveys, going from light blue to dark blue, pre to post. We also found an increase in student acceptance, although we were a bit worried because student acceptance actually was quite high initially, probably because we were working with advanced students. We also found, interestingly, you could see that green box, and for the students who experienced one of those in-class activities from the CRS resource, that those students in particular had higher increases in understanding than students who didn't experience those activities. So those activities can pave the way for even higher student understanding. And we have published these results in a few education journals, and the basic summary is that this was the first study to assess high school students' understanding of natural selection before and after materials that use human examples to teach evolution, and to measure high school students' understanding of natural selection before and after using these strategies to acknowledge the cultural controversy about evolution. And that the overall increases in understanding of natural selection suggest that using human examples along with these classroom activities that promote positive dialogue really hold promise as an effective strategy for high school evolution education. As I mentioned before, we have published these in 2 articles in Evolution Education and Outreach, and I am currently leading the next phase of the project, LUDA, the Learning, Unity, and Diversity in Alabama project. So we are focusing just on Alabama. We're revamping our curriculum materials and CRS resource for introductory high school biology. So 9th to 10th graders, the last science class that most US adults will take. We're creating a parallel unit that includes humans and one that does not, to see what difference that makes. And we are doing all of this field testing in Alabama. The map on the right shows where all of the teachers are located. The red dots are the teachers who participated in 2 years of pilot testing. The blue dots are all the additional teachers who will be working with our materials next year, almost 40 teachers. And in 2015, Alabama adopted new state science standards for the first time that explicitly include evolution. But Alabama actually is one of the last states that has a warning sticker on biology textbooks that evolution is just a theory. So stay tuned to see how our results turn out, but very positive so far with the pilot test. All right, so I want to end with an image of the Ephrata Public Library in Pennsylvania when our traveling exhibit was there. I think this really embodies our approach. What does it mean to be human? Come talk about it.
Wow, thank you very much. That was fantastic. I'm sure everybody agrees with me. I know I learned a ton about the great outreach you guys are doing at the Smithsonian just here in the US, and that was really fantastic. Do have a few questions that we'll hopefully be able to get to. And I do want to just, one comment that was left for you is that, this isn't really a question, but coming from rather agnostic or atheist community, it's fascinating to see how you approach with respect the topic of human origins, keeping in mind visitors with various religious beliefs. And I think that is true. I think the way you guys go about it, it's really respectful, and you don't, insult people for thinking differently. And I think that's great. So whoever posted that, really, really good comment. One question, sorry. Can we reconcile the human evolution narrative from a scientific perspective with the religious/creationist beliefs of many practitioners from the global south?
This is an excellent question. I think we are attempting to do this in the US South. I've also actually worked with Dr. Habiba Chirchir, who was a postdoc with us in the Human Origins program at the Smithsonian and now teaches at Marshall University. We put on a workshop, 2 workshops for teachers in Kenya within the last couple of years. And so we are sort of, I think the approaches that we're using in the materials that we've developed for a US perspective are also potentially useful in the global South, but stay tuned. We will see.
Let's see if we can answer one more. COVID-19 must have really set you guys back, specifically for the public outreach. What were some of the most effective ways of overcoming this, when many things went virtual?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, the project I'm doing with schools is on hold, but we did pivot our public programs to online. We were able to do a lot of programs, particularly in the spring of last year. And the benefit of online programs is we often can actually reach larger audiences. So it's a good question, though.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're running out of time. Once again, we really appreciate you coming and giving this talk. And I'm sure if anyone has more questions or would like to know more, they can always send you an email.
Absolutely. Please do.
So again, thank you. And everybody, we have one more session we'll try and get to now. So thank you very much for attending and see you on the other panel.
Thank you.